These are some of the pictures that we took on our recent trip to the Yucatan Peninsula. We stayed in Merida, and the two major places we visited were
Chichen Itza and Uxmal.
Right. So, how'd we get there? Well, Pam and I left our home up here in Clarion and drove down to Pittsburgh, where we waited in endless lines to get through to our boarding gate. But we managed in the end and flew down to Houston. Pete, in the meantime, started it from Seattle, came to the same place, and here we are in Houston. After a 4-hour or so wait, we flew on down to the Yucatan Peninsula and Merida, which is the capital city
of the Yucatan province.
Right. We had a taxi driver waiting for us with the sign that said Hufnagel, and he took us to our hotel, which was
the Wyndham.
The Wyndham.
Formerly called the White Tower.
Oh, I like the White Tower a lot better. This is sort of a grainy picture. Forgot to take a picture of the Wyndham, but this is what it looked like. Here we are in our room, relaxing on our cell phones. And that evening we went down to the restaurant inside the hotel and had this concoction.
Yeah, Pete and I had this. It was a traditional Yucatan dish, kind of like little tortillas on the bottom with all sorts of toppings on them. I had something similar in Guatemala. Yeah, but it was a little different than that. So, a little regional difference.
Okay. Well, we went to sleep. We got up the next morning, and that was a Sunday. And we decided to walk down to the center of the city. The street we picked to walk upon started off sort of beat up, but sure didn't look like Pennsylvania. But gradually, as we went along, the architecture improved. A lot of the buildings were painted these fantastic colors. As we walked by one of them, a man was roller painting part of the building, and part of the spray got on my pants. First little catastrophe. As we walked along, the houses got nicer. And eventually we came to this church.
Yeah, this was not the church where we actually attended Mass, but this was a nice little church, as you can see, 1734. Here's another view of it, and some interior shots coming up.
And we just poked our head in and had a look around and went merrily upon our way.
Past an interesting little shop.
Yeah,
Maria Mexican
Bonita.
Stuff.
And eventually we came to the center of things and had a quick look around, and then
there was a market going on, as we can see, with all these fancy tarps and umbrellas.
It seemed to be the market was every day of the week, not just Sunday.
Well, it did seem like, people were there every day.
Right. And there was a central plaza, and across the plaza you could see the big church. So we walked over that way, past this building, and came to the church. And do you remember the name of this church?
Well, it's the cathedral.
Oh, the cathedral. Yeah. Okay. This is a particularly nice one. That sky looks like somebody made it up. All looks in very good repair. And we went in there so that Pam and Pete could go to church, it being Sunday. But it was very confusing. Service was just ending. It seemed like they had continuous, no waiting, continuous masses.
One ended, the next one started right away. No break in between.
We walked out after a bit and cruised around a bit more. We met a man selling cigars in the plaza, and he pointed out a few buildings and told us that we really needed hats. Was that the guy, the hat guy?
Well, let's see.
Or no, this was the first guy. He was going to take us to see the crafts of the area, and he took us to this store, Mundo Maya.
Yes, that's right. He took us to Mundo Maya.
And inside...
I was just going to say the cigar guy was the first guy we talked to who claimed to be a student of anthropology, and he was only selling Cuban cigars to be able to speak English to people, to prove his English.
He was a nice guy, but he was a tout.
Yeah.
pushing us towards this Munda Maya. But they had some nice stuff in there, I thought. We bought some of these little gizmos. Here's some more, everything bright and colorful. Lots of skeletons, or skulls
Yeah.
if you look.
Day of the
Day
Dead
of the
type of
Dead
stuff.
things.
Mhm.
I sort of like it for some reason. Well, we bought a little trinket or two there and then came out and walked around some more, admiring the various storefronts. And then it was time for lunch, and we went to this little, what can you call
It
this?
was a quesadilla.
A quesadilla. And if you look closely here, this is Pete sitting here. Pam
Yes.
clambered up these stairs and took pictures of the place. I liked the
Yeah.
pictures and I enjoyed the place.
So, well, just a word about these. So, you can see the lady there on the right is actually making the tortillas, and she's got the big tortilla griddle. And then the glass enclosed case on the right has all the various fillings that they would put in them. I think at this place we just had the cheese ones. Is that right?
Yes, I think. I was very skeptical that I would like anything.
Uh-huh.
Uh, we came out of there and met another student of archaeology up near the church, and he's the one that said we needed hats. And he took us to this store that specialized in fancy hats made from henequen fibers, which come from an agave plant. And we promptly bought. Here's the terrace where we were at as we bought those. The henequen fiber looks like this. Something about burying it in the ground to have it.
Oh well, they make it in they make the hats in caves because the fiber has to be moist and the cave is cool with steady humidity and everything. And
Okay.
yeah, we did not go into one of these caves. We did see a picture of one someplace of the people making hats in the caves.
Anyway, we ended up, after some haggling on my part, I haggled.
Mm-hmm.
There are Pam and Pete in their new henequen hats. And they worked all right, I'd have to say.
Yes, I have to say, finally at 62 years of age, I found out how to keep a hat on my head. The hat band is what does it.
We then walked around a bit, noticed this interesting tree, noticed these curious looking eggs.
No, they're buns of some sort.
Buns. And then we went back to our hotel. You see the safe over here, wide open at the moment, and here we are, all our suitcases. It was a nice enough room, I thought. We didn't have any complaints. It wasn't noisy. Okay, so these are the things we purchased. While we were out, we arranged for a tour guide to take us to Chichen Itza.
Mm-hmm.
And the next morning we got up, I took a picture of a flower, and it was Chichen Itza Day for us.
Mm-hmm.
So that involved a drive from Merida. Took about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to drive there. It was quite the drive, but we had our breakfast first. Pam with her eggs and ham, and Pete with much the same, and me much the same, looking frazzly.
That is black bean stuff with it, like black bean puree. I liked it quite a bit. I'm not sure anybody else did.
Well, you look happy.
Mm-hmm.
Pete, well, he looks happy.
Mm-hmm.
I even look a little happy. After breakfast, we went out front, and there was Saul, our guide, a friendly man who I talked to the whole time and got his life story. And as we drove along, he would point out the various villages and how people lived in the villages. And eventually, we came to
Resort.
a resort on the edge of Chichen Itza, the back way in, we were told. And we wandered around this resort for a half hour or so, had a look in the gift shop. Saul arranged tickets, supposedly, a happy guy. Pam and Pete comparing notes. These are all resort pictures. It's pretty hard to take a bad picture in there, I'd have to say. Very lovely place. We were just passing through. And finally, it was time to get on with the day's business of seeing Chichen Itza. So we walked through a gateway, and there in the distance was the observatory.
Right.
Some people came and wanted our tickets, and Saul had great difficulty getting us past those guardians of the gate. So we ended up cooling our heels in front of this ramshackle structure while he ironed it all out. And so we took pictures there. But eventually he came back, all things sorted, and in we went to examine Chichen Itza. That's an elephant poking itself out, right? An elephant head?
Well, I think it's a nose, but I don't think it's supposed to be an elephant.
Oh,
They didn't have
oh.
elephants there.
Oh, they didn't have elephants, of course, right. A nose then. Some columns floating around, and this was nice. This is the oldest part. I was looking for something better than this, but Pam and Pete really liked the first iguana they saw. Liked every iguana they ever saw, and their cameras would come out and they'd snap a picture.
Mhm.
Here's Pete in dramatic pose.
There's the observatory again.
And we wandered out. This is something else. And all this was explained, and I suppose we had the guidebooks to prove it, but we're not giving a history lesson here. We're just rambling through our photographs. It was a hot day, hot.
About 90 degrees that day.
Right. Glad we had our hats, sweat, and had to sit down periodically to keep cool. But always something new to see. And if you looked, there were the heat lovers out there, more iguanas. I think we're just about done with the observatory. It was the first place we came to, so it got more than its share of attention.
Yeah, I think this one's called the House of the Deer, I think.
Take your word for it. Nice walls, though. Pete was running around taking pictures of textures to use in his game, and I think this was a texture picture. And of course, there were vendors everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And they had, to attract you, they made the sound of the jaguar, I think.
Yeah, things they blew in to make a jaguar sound. So a lot of people complained about Chichen Itza because of all the vendors, and I don't know. I mean, they didn't bother me. I mean,
yeah,
you don't feel like you're, in ancient times or anything, but it's colorful.
Right.
And, these people are trying to make a living.
And they don't badger you.
Right.
If you just keep walking, they leave you alone. They have their dignity. We didn't buy anything. This is a Mayan house with a thatch roof. Inside, we have the sticks, I guess. It's certainly not bamboo. And this was set up with a little cross at the front. These people were Christians, forced to be Christians by the Spaniards long ago, but they still maintain a distant connection with their old religions. This was one of my favorite places, the Temple of the 1,000 Pillars, I think it's called. And I had my doubts there was 1,000 there, but then we kept walking, and there kept being more and more of them everywhere you looked. And once you went inside this, the pillars went all around an area that was the center of things, and evidently there were ceremonies in there and such back there in the old days.
Yeah, probably roofs on top of these to shade people because
could be.
Their pyramids had temples on tops, but there really wasn't anything going on inside these pyramids.
Right. But of all the places at Chichen Itza, this was the most surreal for me. I really liked the 1,000 Pillars a lot. Little details. I don't know if that's a cat or a dog, maybe a jaguar. We came walking out of there and followed the crowd and came to
castle.
The castle, they call it. This is the backside, which hasn't been worked upon. Here we are looking at it from the side. It's all roped off. You cannot climb it. In the old days, it was quite possible to climb to the top, but people would fall down and get blood stains. And
right. Nowadays, what you do is stand in a certain spot and clap your hands, and it makes the sound of a quetzal.
Yeah, it's very peculiar. You'd expect an echo, but it's something else. It wouldn't surprise me if they had a man up there making that sound in response to the clapping, but that's not true. It really does work. Miscellaneous flower. Lots of people roaming around, especially in the area of this castle. And everybody takes a million pictures of this thing, including the three of us. Pete and I had a camera each, and Pam had two, but I think she only carried one at a time. I decided I was getting too many pictures of stones, and so I roamed around and took pictures of the guides explaining to their crowds exactly what was happening. Of course, we had a guide too, but it was just the four of us, Saul and we three. We went to the ball court. You can see up here the place that the ball supposedly was poked through. And there were carvings, some sort of a story on the side there. Very interesting, and I've forgotten the story. But it's all in the book. I remember the day. I remember the pictures. I remember the mood. It was a good time. Here we are walking along. I look like I'm going to fall out of my pants there. But they stay on somehow. Should have worn my shirt out. It would have been cooler. Stuff at the tables. Pete having a look at the tables himself. And more old stairs leading to nowhere. Here we are resting, getting on in the day now. There's Saul, Pam, and Pete. A little more carving action. I like this because it's got a compass here, northeast, southwest. At least that's what I think it is. This is a cenote, where they would get their water. And when the cenotes gave out, they all left, leaving Chichen Itza vacant, except for some miscellaneous people living in the, what was the underbrush called? Can't remember now. In the surrounding underbrush. I mean, it's not quite a forest. It's too low to be a forest. We walked out and went to a restaurant for our lunch.
Yeah, this was back up the previous one. That
This
was
one?
yeah. That actually was the sink area in the ladies' room. It was a very, very nice ladies' room.
Yes, you could live in there. It has cushions. Was there a little band playing regional music?
No.
No. Well, it'd probably be embarrassing anyway. Here's the meals we had. You'll have to talk about these. Well, that's bananas, right?
Yeah, I think that might have been mine, but not sure.
That could have been Saul's.
Was that yours?
Yes,
salad?
I think that's mine. Right.
The Cobb salad.
Cobb
It was
salad.
the most unusual Cobb salad I ever saw.
And this might be Pete's.
Yeah, I think that was Pete's.
They had a restroom outside, and this little interesting statue of a duck sitting out there. I liked it. Anyway, after lunch, we went out. That is
Not our car.
Not our car. Okay.
Some other
And drove home again, snapping the odd picture of the structures we went by. Looks good. Looks good. Along the way, we had seen a cemetery or two, and I think that's here. Yep, we're coming to that. And we asked Saul if he'd stop at a cemetery and let us walk around. So driving past all these structures, there's a church, I think. Seemed to be a little store. The people seemed content with their lives, sitting around, watching the traffic. Lots of dogs free-ranging around the countryside. Saw a lot of dogs. And then this is the cemetery. It's a walled cemetery, and as we came up to the entrance, I saw this pile of garbage, I thought at first, but no. What was it, Pam?
Oh, just remnants from all the decorations from the Day of the Dead. Day of the Dead was November 2nd. We were there a little bit later in November, so the stuff had withered up.
Right.
We were just clearing up.
So this is just part of the cleanup campaign. We walked inside the walls and were treated to the strangest cemetery I've been in a long time. Lots of color. Lots of different ways of stashing your dead away. Like a little city almost, I thought. It was getting on. The light was going pretty quickly. Good different kinds of pictures. And I couldn't read anything. My Spanish just isn't up to it. So we stayed here, 15 or 20 minutes. The day slowly fading away. And then it was off to home. We were weary but very happy with the day.
Yeah, so the next day we just stayed in Merida, I believe.
Right.
Right.
So we had walked in a sort of a so-so street the previous time we had stayed in Merida. This time we found what's the name of the grand street that runs?
Well, Montejo, was it Avenue Montejo or Paseo Montejo?
Okay, something
anyway,
like that.
named after the Montejo family, conquistador family.
And it was, quite grand, very large mansions, very wide street, wide walks. It was glorious.
Champs-Élysées of Merida.
Oh, there you go. Here's what a Yucatan license plate looks like.
These little chatting seats were strategically located all over the place. Never saw anybody sitting in them, but oh well.
The odd flower.
This was a shop display. You can see the reflection, Hank, there just
mopping away.
Yeah. It was still hot.
And then we went into the Museum of the City of Merida. And they had a curious and eclectic collection of this and that. Table I liked quite a lot. A big pile of Henneken, and I sat my hat on top of it. They're hard to believe they're both the same fiber, but they are. Curious whatnots and thises and that's. Some religious stuff. This guy's trying to tell me something. And here's some more of these seats, but this time
was just a museum display of
right,
seats,
of the
explaining
seats
how they happened to come to be there.
An odd angled house. I'd like to build that someday. And then up on the top floor was some student art. Very curious. So we left the City Museum and got a taxi cab. Worst cab ride we had. He was cheap enough, but he understood no English. But he understood that we wanted to go to the Museum de Mayo, which unfortunately, it was a Tuesday, is closed on Tuesdays. Somebody might have told us this, I feel. So we got another ride back in another cab, this time a guy from Los Angeles who talked football with me and his life since he moved to Merida from Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think like his mother or both parents were actually from down there.
Oh, okay.
You know, they were sort of temporarily in the United States when he happened to be born, but he spoke perfect English.
Yeah,
you know.
It was good. I was glad we got him. So he dropped us off back in the center of the city, and we went to the
it's like the government
city
house.
hall or government house,
Yeah.
right? And these are pictures of that. There's a second floor, and I like these arched openings. Lots of other people did as well. Here I'm looking down at a crowd of tourists being shown the ropes. Up in the second floor, there was this nice gallery with the light streaming in across the checkered floor. I like that quite a bit. More checkered floor. Everybody liked that.
A view of the cathedral from upstairs in that checkered floor room.
And these are just more pictures of that. Then we walked across the way to
Casa Montejo.
Casa Montejo, which is formerly a house. We had read in the government house about some rebel being caught and drawn and quartered in front of this house. Contrast of images.
Yeah. Well, so this house, Montejo, like I said, he was basically the conquistador who finally subdued
the
the
Maya.
Yucatan Peninsula.
Here's the courtyard in there. After we had a look at that house, we wandered around in the plaza and found people feeding the pigeons. I'll only show you 4 pigeon pictures here, but we had nearly 100 of them. We were all snapping up a storm trying to get the perfect pigeon picture. Pretty good picture of a kid. From out there, the cathedral looms. It pops up pretty much everywhere you might stand down in central Merida. And that pretty much took care of that day.
Well, there was one interesting thing. Uxmal's coming up next, but when we were walking back one day, Saul, who we had already arranged to take us to Uxmal, I think we were supposed to go on Thursday, but something came up.
Oh,
And he
yes.
had to do a ship, and he actually was running around looking for us.
Right,
and found
right.
us.
Yeah, originally he was supposed to take us Thursday,
Yeah.
but he also did tour ships that came into a harbor some miles away. And the tour ship he was going to be doing on Wednesday was going to come in on Thursday. So by this time we'd discovered Walmart.
Oh, yeah.
And in the evenings we'd walk over to Walmart and pick around and get the makings for our dinner, usually
Like sandwiches.
right, sandwiches and a
ham
Coke
cheese
and
buns.
buns and sweets of the region. So we had walked over there that night, and as we were coming back, here comes Saul panting along, saying, "Can we go tomorrow?" And Pete said, "Sure." And that's just exactly what we did. So this was on Wednesday. We went to Uxmal, my favorite place on our trip, I believe.
It was very wonderful.
Right. So it's more of a southerly trip, about an hour to get there.
Closer than Chichen Itza.
Right. And here's what I had for breakfast that morning.
Well, we always they would give us a fruit plate at breakfast. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So, right.
I can tell that was mine because that's my pill bottle there.
Oh, there you go.
It looks
Okay.
like my pills.
Damn. Yes,
Well,
yeah.
It's just everybody's fruit resistant.
Saul was with us again and took us to a market, which was quite the deal.
Very
We
nice.
roamed around and took pictures of odd vegetables and the people who were stocking them. Some odd fruits. These
Well, they're
lower
too
things
odd.
are called pineapples, and the yellow things are bananas. Here's Saul standing with one of the sellers. He's got this drink in his hand that he kept adding things to it as we went along. It started out as some sort of a corn mush, thin corn mush, I think.
Yeah, it tasted kind of like creamed corn.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, but he
was
seemed to be at his ease, and the vendors, at his urging, would let us have little snibs of things sometimes. Here he is again. This cup never seemed to get emptier for some reason. He kept putting more and more stuff into it. Lots of people there. And this was a Wednesday.
Yep.
So I think either market day is Wednesday or it's like this every day of the week.
It's probably like this every day. Yeah, you look
Yeah.
at these houses. I mean, they're very small. They certainly don't have a lot of storage space.
Right.
They
So
might not even have refrigeration. I don't know.
look at that woman. She looks like she's a Mayan, doesn't she?
Yep. Probably has Mayan ancestry.
And what are those fruits to the right?
That might have been that local melon. There was some kind of local fruit that we don't have up here that we got a taste of. It was quite good.
And there's the market to our rear, and Saul took this picture of us. Another advantage to having a personal guide. He really can take care of you. It was an excellent idea to get him, I thought. So I think we're going to do that from now on when we go to places. So here's Pete, all ready to take some pictures of Uxmal. Here's Saul pointing up to the top of the magician's palace. Here he's explaining some mystery of the local terrain. And here is the magician's palace. No one's ever taken these pictures before. Ha! Here's one of these noses laying in the dirt. Uxmal is much less reconstructed than Chichen Itza, but there are some places that are quite nice. And all fixed up. I prefer a little bit of a ruin myself. And there's iguana at this place as well as exotic flowers. The first great place we came to was this wall of steps. uh, it was steep and it was high and the wind was blowing and you can see the people streaming up diagonally and streaming down diagonally. And so we had to hoof our way up. Pete made very little trouble of getting up. Pam kept a hand down just in case, but she did all right. Here we are looking down at a couple of guys coming up.
Well, another advantage to the personal guide was he held onto our hats and stuff for us. I mean, he's probably climbed this many times.
Oh, yes, he'd been a
no
guide for
problem.
10 years or something
Yeah.
like that.
Whereas, it was windy and,
Right.
Our hats would have been blowing off and I would have been hanging onto the hat or chasing the hat and falling down those steep stairs.
Here's about the best picture we have of the three of us on the trip. A good one. Up at the top here, lots of carvings to look at or turn around and you can see the magician's palace in the distance. So explaining everything, and then when it was done we came hoofing right back down. Down, 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 past bits and pieces of archaeology. Lower now, lower still. See that head tucked in there? A grisly sort of skeleton. They have these skeleton heads. I sort of like it. Three men discussing something in Spanish. The magician's palace peeks out everywhere you look. This is oh, it's gone. I want to say the sisters.
Well, the nunnery?
Maybe.
I don't think this was the nunnery. I think the nunnery is where the kids were running up and down the stairs.
Oh, okay. Here's Saul finally worn out. He said that we got him to go places at Uxmal that he'd never visited in all his years of guiding, which I took as a compliment. Sometimes it's all wide open spaces and sometimes everything's cramped in tight. There's names for all these buildings, but they're made up names.
This is their ball court.
Oh yes, there it is.
Much smaller than the one at Chichen Itza.
No one really knows. This is the graveyard where Saul had never been. And he knew it was there. It was on the map, but I guess nobody ever guided had the energy to want to see it all.
Yeah, the temperature this day at Uxmal was much more pleasant than it had been at Chichen Itza.
And he talked of bugs all over the place a few days earlier, but we didn't run into any bugs either. This is the motel, as we called it, another place he knew it was there, but we traipsed down and had a look in the motel room. Of course, it wasn't a real motel. More flowers. Fascinated by those, so lots of pictures of those tall structures. Of course, there's a story to go with everything here, and we heard it all. This one was about a snake. You can see the head and tail of the snake if you look carefully. It all slips away fairly quickly, but it's all in books if we wanted to dig it out again. This is just an impression of a good time we had. There's the three of us, Pam's picture. We look like we've had a good day. After we left Uxmal, we went to this place called Chaco Story, which was an odd sort of a place. It had the agave plants that they make henequen from, and the henequen is then made into a kind of rope called sisal, so there's lots of names to remember. The odd little interesting flower was there. They seemed to make a specialty of that. And here we are, having paid on our way along the path.
Well, this place was a restaurant where we ate.
Oh yes, did we eat there before we went to Chaco town?
Maybe.
I think
It
we
seemed
did.
like
I think
Chaco
we
was
did.
the
So that
last
picture's out of order.
thing,
We went there,
Yeah, this was
and had a meal.
some plants there at the restaurant.
Right. But back at Choco
Oh,
Story,
yeah, because here's Choco Story, these bratty little kids.
right, these bratty little kids dumping sand all over each other. And then when their parents came, they said, "We fell."
Yeah.
What kind of flower is that, man?
It's a hibiscus.
It's a great hibiscus. And this was much more commercialized, a place that they had invented and put together, Choco Story, and their first location hadn't worked out, so they decided to move it closer to Uxmal in hopes that more people would show. There wasn't too many people there the day we were there. This is a guy grinding chocolate down, is that right?
Yeah, he was demonstrating, you know, how they process chocolate, and then
Okay.
we get a little chocolate drink.
And we saw like some jaguars and some monkeys and some, performing Mayan ritual kind of thing, but I don't have pictures of them in here. That's pretty much what we did that day. The next day, we went to Museum del Mundo Maya, the building that had been closed on Tuesday. We were at the Thursday now. They just made this recently and have moved a bunch of stuff into it. Pterodactyl bones. Pete was fascinated with
I
it.
mean, basically, it was telling history all the way back to
Right.
dinosaur times.
Didn't mess around. It was okay, a fun place. It's a Archaeopteryx, I think. I don't know what that is.
Well, I think it's like a reproduction of what a cave is like.
Oh. Various frog statues, a conquistador, Day of the Dead guy, more Day of the Dead guys, an interesting ring, scary guy. It was an interesting museum. It seemed to lack organization a little bit to me. You didn't know what you're going to do. This is a picture showing an idealized Mayan community of today, which I was taken with. The Yucatan is flat. Yucatan is flat. Not a lot of mountains. Hills is the best we can do. Here's some more kid art showing Day of the Dead things.
Yeah, they had a big contest.
Oh, to see who could.
And so all these entries were on display at the museum.
So we left the museum and went to a nearby mall where we had.
It was just within walking distance.
Yeah, right.
And we walked over. Yeah, we went to Burger King.
Yeah, Burger King, Mexico style. You can see it there in the background. And we sat and ate, and we were ready to sit by then. Then we took a taxi cab. It felt like it was going to fall apart, but it got us there. And back near our hotel, we went to check out a interesting monument that sits in the middle of the street. The artist evidently spent 30 years building this. It was like one guy built this. It was getting on towards dusk, but impressive nonetheless. And that was the end of our trip. The next morning, we hied ourselves out to the Merida airport, boarded our flight, flew up to Houston, hung around until it was time for Pete's flight to leave. This is the last we saw of him on the trip. He looks none the worse for wear. And he went home. Shortly after, we did the same thing.